morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Danny Smith, Executive Vice President and co-owner of Color ID, and welcome to Color ID's Campus Forum Series, continuing the conversation. Today's session is titled Going Mobile for Under $1 Million, and is the fifth and final session of the first Forum Series. Beginning this Thursday, April 23rd, we start the second Forum Series of 5 live sessions that will run each Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Each session generally lasts 60 minutes and will repeat once again in the third Forum Series at future dates to provide attendee flexibility. Hey, please feel free to invite colleagues from your institution or your company or anyone you know across the identity industry who would benefit from participating in the Forum Series. A registration link you can share can be provided by your account manager or product manager. Now, at the beginning of today's session, relevant to the institutional attendees, we'll again do a Menti poll to learn about the unique challenges that you're now experiencing. It's really simple to do. You just open a browser on your PC or mobile, go to menti.com, that's MENTI.com, type in a 6-digit code, and we'll give you the code, and we'll explain more about that in the presentation. You know, we're privileged to have developed such strong relationships over the past 20 years, and we're very grateful that we can come together and stay connected. We have a very large group of identity industry attendees joining us today, and they're from all over the world. So as we say, whoever you are and wherever you may be, we welcome you, all of you. And we hope that you find the investment of your time a great value and encourage you to be interactive in these sessions. Now, leading today's technical discussion will be David Stallsmith, Director of Product Management for Color ID. And David brings a wealth of technical information from over 14 years of working with advanced identity solutions. Now, many of you have worked with David over the years as he works closely with manufacturers, vendors, and end users to promote understanding of the complicated products and services that comprise our identification industry. He's contributed to the decision-making process at many universities, healthcare facilities, and government agencies as they've considered acquiring contactless, smart card, mobile ID, and biometric systems. And since 2006, David has presented annually at the NACU conference, and he also has presented at NACUS's annual and leadership conferences, the European and Canadian Campus Card Users Conference, and full-day identity summits hosted by prominent universities throughout North America. And joining David on today's session as moderator is Mark Deegan, Color ID's Corporate Marketing Manager. In addition to managing Color ID's marketing department for the past 16 years, Mark also juggles the duties of account representative for some of our most strategic partners, both customer and corporate. He's also project manager for Color ID's banking-related customers. Mark and David's technical knowledge concerning advanced identity solutions is a testament to their commitment to our industry, and a great example of the value differential Color ID employees bring to our customer and our corporate partner relationships. Now, just a few housekeeping items, we'll get started. We really want these sessions to be interactive, and we encourage you as much as you can, please, to utilize the question box to submit your questions. And depending on the question, we'll answer it in real time, or we'll wait until the conclusion of the presentation during the Q&A. In addition to answering questions, there will also be live polls throughout the presentation. So please make sure you participate in those and be as prompt as possible. Also, please note that Color ID's entire higher education team is listening in today, and again, wanted me to let you know that they're here for any questions or follow-up discussions. Just call or shoot your account manager an email. Also, a reminder, everyone that completes the 5-session forum receives a certificate of completion and also a Color ID swag bag filled with some nice stuff. Color ID can confirm everyone's attendance, so you don't have to do anything in regard to that. Each session does require a separate registration, so make sure you've registered for all the future sessions. Hey, thanks everybody for the privilege of your time and keeping us connected while we're apart. I'm going to turn it over now to David and Mark to get started. David?
Thanks, Danny, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, mobile for less than $1 million. Big promise and a title. We'll see how that goes as we get into it. Let's start off first, though, with a Menti word cloud. And if you type in the code at menti.com 230038, you'll get this screen, and then you can tell us how you feel about your phone. And I thought, since we're talking about mobile, You know, we're always thinking about students, academics, administrators. How do other people want to use their phones? Let's just think about what the phone is to each of us first, and then figure out where we're going to go from there. It's a lifeline. Breaks too easily. It's powerful. Chained. Ouch. All right, while that's running, the agenda today will be this Mentee, and then there'll be some more polls sprinkled throughout. We'll talk about where is mobile today. Then I'm going to talk about components of mobile ID infrastructure, and then how integration works with mobile, and then how you can get started. So that's the agenda. Go ahead and take another minute here. We'll let this run for a little bit. And this will all be available. I think we'll figure out a way to attach this to the slide deck as we share them. I think we should be able to do that. All righty. So let's get into our presentation. All right, moving right along. The agenda, where is mobile today? And it is a broad question. First thing, and I've shown this slide before, in 2012 at NACU, I did a presentation on mobile. And this, actually the presentation was about cards, contactless cards, and how we're going to migrate to contactless cards just 8 years ago. 5 years after the iPhone had been introduced, here was the big deal, near field communication. And even at that time, would the iPhone 5 get NFC? It was a big deal. We were worried about that 8 years ago. And then in case it didn't, would you consider putting NFC in your phone through an SD card, or could it be through the SIM, or maybe a case with an NFC chip and antenna? Well, we've come a long way since that time. And when you say mobile, in the card office, we're thinking about opening doors and making payments. But meanwhile, around campus, there's all kinds of mobile stuff going on. And I met some people from Moto Labs at a NACU Near You conference a couple months ago, and I checked their website, and they're giving out awards for how universities are using their infrastructure to create university apps for phones for use around campus, recruiting and admissions, engagement, student engagement, communication, new student orientation, and then best overall. But the point is, these are university built apps using Moto, and they're being used a lot. And then Guidebook, I just did a quick Google search. What else is going on with mobile? Guidebook has a whole lot of offerings here for mobile use around campus. Also, there are a lot of campus safety apps, and they contain integrated solutions. They support third-party apps. They can have emergency and event management, attendance, check-in, get help, all kinds of stuff. There is a lot available that it could be either sponsored by the university or just something that students could download themselves and use. And then around card functions, there are apps that are in use right now. Mobile ordering, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, Topingo, now Grubhub for ordering and delivery. Print Copy has mobile solutions that may be separate from your card office offerings. They all can be integrated, and the payments can be made through those apps to your card system, or maybe they're running independently in some cases. So there is a lot going on with mobile that is way above and beyond what people had used cards for before. So mobile is already on campus, and it's a big deal. So now this is a poll run within GoToWebinar. Mark, you want to run this one?
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, our first poll question of today is % of campus transactions involving third-party apps. So everyone, just please try to plug in your percentage that best fits your campus. We'll try to close this up here after we get a certain percentage of folks voted. Okay, we're past 50%, just a little bit more. Got a lot of good responses here. We've got close to 100 people attending today's webinar, so just want to make sure we get some good interaction here. Okay. All right, I'm going to share it. So 70% of you have 0 to 20% transactions. 25% are at 20 to 50, and only 6% are showing over 50%. So there you go, Dave. That's the first one.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Not unsurprising. So the campus card system is still collecting most of the transactions, and that makes sense. But 25% is a big number if that runs up as high as 50% of what people are using their phones for. And these are the transaction apps, not necessarily things that are other people are using for calendar management or classwork and stuff like that. So mobile is on campus. It's already a big deal, just like it's in our lives. We love our phones, we hate our phones, we all use them all the time. So let's talk about the components of mobile transactions. And now from here on out, we're going to really focus on mobile as it relates to the one card system, the card office, and using your phone as a card. Effectively, that's where we are. I mean, over the last 10 years, as we were waiting for mobile to mature enough to the point that it would start to be adopted in some good measure, which it now is. It's starting to catch on, obviously. Which way was it going to go? Was it going to be a software transaction, or was it going to be a mimic of a card? And the latter is where we are right now. When you hold your phone up to a reader, the reader thinks it's reading a card effectively. And just like it's a barcode card or a magstripe card or a prox card, the reader is picking up an ID from the phone, and it's using that to communicate to the system, point of sale, door access, whatever the system is, just like you presented a card. Now, there are a few exceptions that we'll discuss those, but in most cases, your phone is just acting like a card, which is not a big surprise. So the three pieces of a mobile credential infrastructure, if you break it out, the first is mobile credentials themselves. Those are the data that's going to be communicated to a reader. And it can be NFC, which is where Apple Pay is these days. It can be using Bluetooth from your phone, which is used right now for access control by some of the systems. And then it could also be over barcode, because the Starbucks app uses barcode, and boarding passes at the gate use barcodes. So, mobile credentials are really using these three technologies to pick up the data. The readers are the second part. So you gotta have a credential, you gotta have a reader, just like the card model. And the reader has to be able to read the mobile credentials, so it has to either have Bluetooth or NFC. And in most cases, it has to be programmed with proprietary or keys that are dedicated to your institution. In most cases, not always, but there are a lot of situations where that is the case. And then the readers need to be able to interface with the system devices behind them. So if it's a reader reading a mobile credential at a point of sale terminal, that reader is either integrated into the point of sale terminal, or more likely it's a separate reader connected to that terminal. If it's a door reader or a lock, it has to interface with the door access control panels in the background. And then if it's a print copy machine, if the reader is built in, it's for sure integrated, but if it's an auxiliary reader, then it has to interface with the operating system of that print copy machine or in some way. So cards, phones, readers, and then the last piece is the mobile identity management. And it has several things that it has to do. If you're going to use mobile credential management, it has to issue the credentials, which is usually done over the air, OTA, and it'll put them on the phone into a mobile app or into a wallet, a mobile app. And then it will manage those credentials so that if there are changes, if you move from one residence hall to another, you need to access to different doors. So the credential may have to be updated into another system. Maybe you get a different credential. Also, changes in the status of the phone holder themselves, can be managed through a management system. Also, at a certain point, you need to deactivate or pause or revoke those credentials. When somebody leaves and you don't want them going through the doors, you don't want them making payments anymore, pull those back. So all of this falls under credential management, but that's kind of the life cycle management. And then the system needs to make sure that the credentials are able to be recognized at the readers. So they have to transmit the credential data to any part of the system that needs to know the numbers or whatever other data is related to the mobile credential itself. So these are the three parts of credential management. So let's talk first about the mobile credential itself. Your phone looks like a card. It all started back in 2004. The NFC forum was formed by Sony, NXP, and Nokia. Phone, Sony made a chip, Nokia made phones, NXP makes chips. And NXP had already started out with MyFair at this point in 2004. They had just introduced the first DeskFire, but really it was about MyFair at that point. Sony was, I think at that point, I think they were already making and using the Felica chips in Japan. And Nokia was at that time was still a popular handset. So it made sense that NFC would be started by these companies. At that point, and I sat through a lot of sessions in the mid-2000s, who talked about how the SIM chip was going to provide the secure element, the secure storage for the data. The only problem was, and nobody, even in those sessions where people would explain in great detail and with very complicated diagrams, was they didn't know who was going to pay the mobile network operators because they actually owned the SIM cards. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. And if you wanted to store data on a SIM, you were going to have to rent space. And so there was a fee there, and that was a problem. And nobody really quite knew how to get over that. But that was the early part of the discussion, because at that point, the SIM was considered the only really secure part of the phone. And early on, NFC, the emphasis was on the consumer market. They were, you'd hear people say, oh yeah, we're going to put NFC on your phone, and then you're going to be able to go up to a movie poster, hold your phone up there, and you're going to learn all about the movie and watch trailers, because they're going to get pulled when you hold your phone up to the tag on that poster. Also, product information from tags on clothing or something you're looking at REI, whatever. I mean, it was just funny, really. It was kind of quaint. It was going to be a consumer play, and NFC was going to bring consumers into more marketing opportunities for retailers. So using NFC for transactions had to wait for smartphones to be introduced. So 2007 iPhone, shortly after that, Android came out with, started being used as an operating system on phones, competing phones, Samsung and others. And now the NFC chip could actually be controlled by a smart operating system, not just a flip phone. And Android got right out there, and they did host card emulation in an earlier version of Android, and they made it open, and you could, developers could get right to it, and they could communicate with that NFC chip and send data in and out of there. Was no problem. And HID and Allegiant got right on it, and they made NFC credentials for their readers on their locks and on their door mount or wall mount readers early on. The only problem was Apple was so focused on building Apple Pay and talking to banks. And the reason for that is because the payments business is enormous, and closed loop transactions and physical access and the things that one card systems at universities are concerned about are not huge by comparison to payments. So Apple was talking to banks, and they were talking to point of sale vendors, and really focused on making Apple Pay work in that area. And they just did not, and I imagine even some of it was around security. They were building a secure system that would be compliant with the payment system and all the government regulations around payments. So they were very focused on all that, and they really didn't want to have anything to do. Google, meanwhile, free operating system, NFC is wide open. But on university campuses, even from the beginning, iPhone was much more prevalent than Android. And so that kind of slowed stuff down. So HID, realizing this was not going real well for NFC, since they weren't going to get Apple for a while, they switched to Bluetooth, and they introduced a Bluetooth version of their mobile ID, BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, and it would work on both Android and iOS. Apple didn't have any restraints around access to the Bluetooth radio on their phones. They securely encrypted the data, so it was not insecure Bluetooth like a lot of Bluetooth transmissions. I mean, you can see Bluetooth, but if you encrypt the data, you can't see the data. So the channel is open, but the data was secure. It obviously had better range than NFC. NFC is designed to work at about an inch or less. Bluetooth works up to 8 feet away. I think what happened though is that partly the timing was too soon back in the early 2010s. Schools weren't ready at that point. They didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't have the readers in place. And so even though Bluetooth was available, the integrators everything hadn't come together yet. And so it kind of just sat there, and it wasn't picked up in any great amount. A few schools, use it for parking here and there, and so for years went by, and then in the meantime, Apple kept this NFC drama going. And iPhone 5, is it going to have an NFC? No, it's not. 6, yeah, 6 actually will, but you can't use it. It's only Apple Pay. Oh, well, maybe they're going to open it up on the. I mean, it was just drama every single. Apple works that stuff. Every release. It's why should I buy a new phone? Well, it's going to have enhanced NFC. So Apple's working that. They're playing the mystery. They're playing the drama. And I think in all of that, knowing that Apple was the phone for most of the users on campus, they just stayed with it. And the Bluetooth low energy option from companies like HID and others kind of got pushed out of mind. It just, everybody kind of thought, well, we're just going to wait for Apple to do something, also our integrators. So that's kind of how we see the last 10 years of the development of mobile ID. And the credential itself is actually just a card number in most cases. If you have HID readers, you're going to use Corporate 1000 format most likely. If you have other readers, you're going to use a student ID or any other identifier. But whatever it is, the reader and the system thinks it's talking to a card and it's getting a card number. Now, there are a couple instances where the applications are more elaborate, and Salto is one of those. And the reason is because Salto actually stores permissions and audit logs on the card whenever it touches a Salto reader. So when they made a mobile app, they put that same functionality into the application also on the phone. So Salto has a lot more going on than just transmitting a card number. There's a two-way conversation going on with the reader. Also, transit apps can store stored value, dollar amounts on your phone if your phone is set up, or some transit apps are Visa or MasterCard apps. There's just a lot of variety in the way that this has been adopted, which makes it all very interesting and a little bit perplexing when you're trying to figure out how you're going to put all this into play at your institution. So let's talk about mobile-enabled readers. The HID I-Class SE readers, and I tend to start with HID here because they are the larger reader manufacturer and card manufacturer. Schlage has been there, and we'll talk about them some. Transact makes readers, but Transact is its own closed loop. So it works well. But if you have Transact, then you know where to go to get mobile. You go to Transact and they'll set you up, and you just say, I want it, and there it is, right? But if you are trying to do something other than that and you're not a Transact school at this point, HID is a serious contender. And there are a couple other readers we'll talk about too, but you will see a lot of HID in this talk. And so my apologies to the other vendors that are listening. you know this is out there. It's just part of the way it works. But also what HID does is often a lot of other vendors are doing similar things. So in describing it with one, so trying not to just be an HID pitch, but HID reader for mobile, start off, if you have iClass SE readers, you can update the NFC firmware. And if you don't have the BLE module and you want to use Bluetooth, you can add that. So you have the option either way. The reader manager is kind of nice. It communicates over Bluetooth with the reader itself from any phone, and it actually can configure the reader. So you don't have to use flashcards to do the configuration. So Bluetooth is good up to 8 feet, which is pretty cool. And it can be dialed down to short range, or it can be turned off. But if you have parking, then that's particularly handy to have that kind of distance. HID just introduced new readers. They're SIGNO readers. They're slimmer. They have a new look. They're optimized for mobile and new card types. And now they have Bluetooth and NFC and OSDP, and they've introduced enhanced contactless polling for Apple Wallet. So all of this makes them, supposedly they're going to read HID cards and other cards more efficiently and have better communications with mobile and other types of cards. So also ASSA locks use HID modules in them so they can read mobile credentials. In this case, and then they can also read integrator supplied credentials. So if it's Seaboard or if it's Transact, then those locks can be flashed to read those credentials from those integrators. Allegion, Schlage Mobile, it has been NFC all along. Schlage did not go the route of HID and introduce Bluetooth. Some of the Schlage locks do have Bluetooth built into them, but it's only for configuration. It's not for access. So if you see an NDE lock and you go, oh, it has Bluetooth, cool. No, it's not for opening the door. It may at some point, but as of today, I don't believe it is an access feature. So NFC, but the good news is that Allegion also has made an arrangement with Apple, and you can put an Allegion credential in an Apple Wallet. It takes integration. One of the integrators has to do this for you. And so you can use Apple credentials from your integrator on Schlage locks and readers, which is cool. So there's a big option for you. SAFETRUST is a company startup. They have a number of, I think, corporate customers. They have some interest in the higher ed market, and some schools have picked up their BLE readers. They provide Bluetooth for wavelengths, for example, but they provide a credential, a portal for that credential, and it's a pretty sophisticated portal, actually. It provides geolocation, time, and date stamp for the transactions whenever credentials are used. They have a wallet for multiple credentials. Their credential will sit in an Apple Wallet, and they are really about Bluetooth. They're not so much of a NFC. They went the route of Bluetooth. So their readers, and then here are wavelengths readers with Bluetooth from SAFETRUST. It'll read SAFETRUST credentials. SAFETRUST provides Bluetooth to ISONUS readers and also to RFID's PC Prox readers. So the credential and the tech in the reader is from SAFETRUST to read Bluetooth, and they have a number of good installations of that going. They also provide logical access dongles for Windows, Mac, and Linux machines. Just a word about keys and mobile, and that is that most of these, if not all of these, credential and reader makers provide a unique encryption key per institution for good size user bases. So this means that the encryption key is like a password that protects the data. Two ways you hear keys. One is like a database guy saying, oh yeah, we have a key, meaning that's the identifier for that record in the database. In the cryptography world, the encryption key is like a password. So people will throw the word key around interchangeably in those two ways, as an identifier and as a password. Just if you're ever confusing the conversation, just stop, clear that up. But if you think of keys as passwords, they're used to encrypt the data. And if you're a university that's going in a particular direction with a card and reader or mobile and reader, then the manufacturer will most likely set you up with a unique key for your readers and your mobile credentials, so that your phone credentials will not work on anybody else's readers except your institution. So that's a good thing. It's very secure. It keeps phones from getting, who knows? Because now the phone is a network device. It's, if you want to hack a card, you have to actually get a holder near the card. A phone is on a network, and we assume that they're well protected, but they're network devices. So, at some point they may become vulnerable. Having a key unique to an institution is actually pretty good security practice. The downside of that then is it makes the readers and mobile credentials even more proprietary than cards in some ways, than just because of those extra keys and the uniqueness of them. So, proprietary is good for security in some cases, but it also means things can be less interoperable. However, because phones can carry multiple apps, you can, instead of trying to stuff 2 or 3 different apps on a particular card, you actually can put the real application, the full-blown application, on a phone. So it gives you some options that way. So if you have mobile credentials and you're using them on your doors and you're using them on your locks, then you want to use them at your point of sale. You want to use them at print copy machines. At the library. You get a USB, a serial reader in most cases, and there are a bunch of companies that make these. OmniKey supports HID credentials with NFC and Bluetooth. They also read other credentials with other kinds of programming. RF Ideas has a Bluetooth with the SAFETRUST credential. Identiv readers support NFC. They can keystroke. They have serial output that can be integrated. If you need RS-485 two-way communication, STID is a company in Europe that makes readers that are available, and there are many others. So there are a lot of different kinds of readers, and they are quite programmable to work with a lot of different key sets and types of credentials. So the good news there is, if you have some kind of device that you want to get a mobile credential into that device so it gets to the system just like it's reading a card, there are a lot of ways to do that, and so that's good news. So just to be clear, people say, we want an NFC, thinking they mean just phone, and NFC typically does mean phone, but then they also get confused and they say, yeah, if it supports DeskFire EV1, then it must read NFC. Well, not necessarily, and not necessarily the NFC that you might have set up for your institution. So it's a broad standard. NFC is a broad standard, and all these modern readers support all these different types of cards and can read NFC, and sometimes have a Bluetooth, a BLE radio in them also. So you just need to make sure when you're talking about NFC, what exactly there are you referring to? So Mark, next question.
Perfect. Okay. Next question, everybody. Would you consider mobile only, having no cards? So let's see what type of results we get here. We can all vote quickly. We could keep this train moving. All right, almost there, guys. Just a few more. And perfect. Okay, I'm going to share this. 55% say maybe in a few years. 24%, no way. 15%, yes, please. And 6%, do we even have a choice? That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to hide this and hand it back over to you, Dave. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. All right, yeah, that is interesting. That for most people are looking at this as something in a few years, and so cards and readers, very important. Here's part number 3: mobile identity management. From the soup to the nuts. What do you need? You're going to have to manage this thing from the beginning to the end. Again, excuse me, an HID mobile chart, just because they had a very nice diagram that kind of showed the whole thing. It starts on the left. You create the identities. You have onboarding in the middle there. goes to a phone, and then the phone is presented to a reader. So that, in very shorthand, is the process. But now here's the other side of it. If you are issuing credentials from the HID, their latest mobile portal, they call it ORIGO, then this is the process. If you sign up and you buy a bunch of credentials from HID, and you just say, no, we're just gonna manage it ourselves. So the manual process is you upload a user, you enter a user by hand, you invite them through email, which is issued automatically, and everybody is pretty familiar with this process. If you have photo upload, it's very similar kind of process. Email goes to the user. You can assign a mobile ID if you have mobile IDs available within your portal that you've paid for. They're now available to be assigned. The email goes to the device of the credential holder, and they explains how it's going to work. They click on the links. They can register. It automatically loads a long 16 alphanumeric character key there, and then they are now their phone is registered, the app is loaded, and then they can securely load the mobile ID itself. And then back at the portal, you can see that that's happening. Here's a dashboard, and you can see how many people have gotten their credentials, how many are registered. It's telling you everything that's going on with the in this case, 119 devices on that system. Out at the mobile user side, there are some nice features. You can determine how your phone is going to work with your readers if you want, like I do. I just have my phone in always mode, so I just hold the phone up near the door, and from black screen, the reader sees the credential, and since I'm supposed to go in that door, the door opens. If I want, I can require it to be unlocked. I can put a fingerprint lock on that, for example. So from my device. Then also HID Mobile Bluetooth has this twist and go feature, which means you just rotate the device about 90 degrees, and it actually will throw, if that's enabled, will throw the credential up to about 8 feet, maybe further at times. But so if you don't have 3 doors close together, that can work very well. Then when it's time to revoke people, you go back to the portal, you click revoke mobile ID, and then the ID is pulled back out of the phone, and they actually physically do not have it. So it's not like you just turn, you may want to also go turn them off in your access control system, but you certainly pull that credential back from the phone. So those last 8 slides were a pretty labor-intensive process. If you have a small population or you're running a pilot, that's not a big deal. But if you're trying to get 1,000 or 15,000 mobile credentials out, you can't do that. It's not going to work. So you want an integrated solution at that point, and who provides the integration? One-card integrators and identity management platforms are integrating mobile access, and access control systems like Linnell and Secure are integrating these credentials so that they can be issued from those interfaces, not going through the process directly with the portal like we just talked about. Another question?
Yeah, Dave. So the next question is, what are the hurdles to adopting mobile for transactions? Let's see what people think. And you can select multiple answers if you'd like. All right, almost there, guys. Just a few more moments, and we'll close it down and share. Okay. Thanks, everybody, for being prompt on that. So 87% simply say cost. Yeah, you're right. It's expensive. It's different. 43% uncertainty due to current events. That is interesting. 40% lack of support from admin. And then 17%, the process is too complicated. It's too hard. Cool. All right, Dave. Well, chew on that,
All right? Great. Thanks, Mark. And you have to think, if the cost is too high and the lack of support from administration, those are kind of interwoven. If the administrators don't think you need this, then of course you don't have the money for it. So those are tightly together. The uncertainty throws all this up in the air. If you're in the planning stages right now and you're trying to get budget for this, when do you start? When do you start paying those bills? It's just a crazy time. But moving along, so let's talk about the business side, because we did talk about the cost. So the three things you need to buy, or two, you need to buy readers, or you need to upgrade your existing readers so they'll read mobile credentials. Maybe it's just a firmware upgrade to your existing readers, or maybe you need to buy a Bluetooth module if you decide to go that way. You need to buy the mobile credential licenses. These are almost always annual subscriptions. They're licenses now. It's a license to use a web portal that's maintained and updated. And a good way of thinking about this is like if you use a one-time password like Duo, this is kind of like that. It's actually, it's quite similar to that. It's one user, one phone, and you're going to use a lot, and it's a subscription, and you pay every year. So that's people, just know these cost like cards or more. But and then maybe integrated mobile ID management. How are you going to do that? If you're getting started with a pilot or a smaller implementation, maybe you don't need number 3. Maybe you just upgrade some readers, you buy some credential licenses, and you get started. One of the schools we work with has 500 licenses, a handful of readers at parking gates, and that's what they do with their mobile. It works, and they're using Bluetooth. Now, if you have to have the Apple NFC, Apple Wallet feature, then you're going to have the integration, because you can't get a mobile credential into the Apple Wallet without somebody doing the software work, the development, to put that in there. Same thing with Google. Google has Google Pay, and I use Google Pay on my phone, and I was looking at that. Can I put my mobile credential into my Google Wallet in Google Pay? And I couldn't find it, and I had to ask around. The internet wasn't very helpful. Google wasn't very helpful, and I found out that Google picks them up from my Gmail account and puts them in my wallet. So again, if it's an app that Gmail can recognize, it'll go in the wallet. If the mobile credential manufacturer developer has not done that integration, it's not going to happen. So again, if you have to do NFC from the wallet, then that's going to have to be involve that third part there. So one card integrators, they provide, like I said about Transact a little while ago, they provide the whole process. They provide the credentials, the readers, the management. They key things together with the encryption keys. They hopefully do the work so that your readers work with your point of sale terminals. If it is Transact, then Transact creates their own credentials. They have their own readers. They also now support HID and Allegiant readers and on locks, which is very cool. They put Transact firmware on those locks for security. So you need Transact credentials to work on Transact configured HID and Allegiant readers. But it's turnkey. You buy the whole thing from them, and that's what you go to the presentations by Duke and Alabama, the other schools, and they just say, here, we want that, and they obviously it's a long and not necessarily real long, but it's an involved process. It's not like it just arrives in a box you open up and flip a switch, but they have worked it all out, and they've done a very nice job of it. Seaboard has a little more open model. If you have HID readers or Allegiant readers or locks, then the mobile credentials will be using the HID credentials. So, but you require the integration to get them into your Apple Wallet. And then Atrium, they're developing, they have some things going on. I saw an NFC demo a few months ago. They're moving quickly, and they probably have a lot to talk about that I'm not up on right now. But anyway, so that's the landscape is changing rapidly, and people are developing and interesting things are happening there. If you go to the Apple site, like I did, what's going on, Apple? Well, you can add your student ID card to your wallet, and you can use your iPhone or Apple Watch to access dorm, library, campus events. Somewhere in there, it says it's up to you and your card system to provide all those services. So if a student goes to the Apple site and reads this, they're going to go, oh, well, this should happen. And what they're not saying here, they do in small print and some later in the page, is that it has to be integrated. It's all about the integration. So just be aware of that. That language is out there on the Apple site. There are some other approaches. There are universities that have integrated the HID ORIGO mobile platform into their university websites and their mobile apps. But they're, in that case, they may be doing, they're probably doing the Bluetooth, because they're not integrating at this point, at least in the couple that I'm familiar with the Apple NFC. So I think it's possible if a school were to contact Apple and you want to do that integration and you want to work with one of the reader card manufacturers, then you can probably pull that together. You're going to have some software people at your university working on that. Also, some schools are using the access control system to manage the HID mobile, and those are probably going to be Bluetooth. So you issue the credentials right from within Linnell. They're there, you can issue them from there. There are ways of doing that. And then, like I said before, Allegiant and HID now support the Apple Wallet NFC. That's all pretty new. And if you're going to do that, then the readers have to be flashed with the keys, and you have to have an integration. So nothing, that just continues. Linnell has Bluetooth, they have readers, and they'll read cards. Salto, I discussed how they have a mobile app, they call it Just In, and it carries the whole Salto app on the phone. So what do we know? There is strong interest in mobile access and payments. Students kind of seem to expect it. They do everything on their phones, and a lot of other people do too. Cost is an obstacle, yes, for sure. There are many options. There are things I didn't talk about today that are either available or will be available very soon. If you're going to replace all the hardware on your campus and do the integration necessary to go campus-wide, then it can be a big project. And we've heard some of the numbers from some of the schools that have done this, and so we know how big that can be. So, a full campus-wide project, it's a big deal. If you are using Magstripe or Prox still, maybe you're going to leapfrog to mobile and not even mess with that contactless card in the middle there. And then, like I said before, mobile apps can provide access to multiple systems in ways that cards can't, because the phone will support a lot of different apps. Now, you will be paying for each of these credentials on the phone, but you will be getting cross functionality from one device. Also, hot off the press, over-the-air issuance could be big in a post-COVID world. So, if people have mobile right now, they're enjoying issuing credentials, whereas people who have to make cards are trying to figure out how that's going to work for them. So no pressure or rush, but not knowing exactly how this is all going to work out, it's something to consider. So back to the title of this presentation, how to go mobile for under $1 million. Start somewhere. Maybe don't get started, but it's not very expensive to buy 100 credentials, put up 2 or 3 readers, where those administrators that don't think this is important can use them. Find somebody that cares about tech, that likes gadgets, that understands that the students expect to be able to use their phones for everything on campus, and are aware that the school they didn't go to has a mobile option that the school they ended up going to doesn't. So just bring your administrators up to speed, find somebody who is interested, give them a credential for their phone, put some readers up where they can use it, create a proof of concept for people who who have some decision making and budget power within your organization. Just a thought. Figure it out. Do you want Bluetooth is quick because you don't need the integration piece. You can put a reader up there, you can put the credential on the phone, and it'll work on Android and iPhone, and probably your administrators are using iPhones. You can issue the credentials by hand from the manufacturer's portal, no big deal. It's just a handful of them. And you can put some readers at point of sale terminals. They'll see, hey, this is not so big. Let people see how it works. Everybody wants to try a new thing. And if you're looking at 2 or 3 years, you've probably been upgrading your readers anyway as you go along. Continue that. And you have a couple years, figure out who's going to be your integrator, or are you going to use an identity management support? Get the word out in your institution. Here's what we're thinking of doing. I can imagine at this point, more so than in the past, that a school might leave one integrator for another because they like the way their mobile works better. I could see mobile support being a decision-making feature in choosing an integrator now more than it was. Obviously, price is still very important, support and all those things, but support for mobile and the way they support it could be a big deal. And we'll see how that goes, because a lot has changed since Duke and Alabama put in Transact Mobile in the fall of 18. And development continues. Apple required full compliance, we all heard. That was the rumor, but maybe now some things are considered out of scope. So full compliance isn't necessarily 100% full compliance. So that's kind of changing, it seems. Android support by integrators is coming along, and then HID and Schlage are now supporting Apple NFC, which wasn't there 18 months ago. They were working on it. They had an NDA. So the question is, what's coming in the next 18 months? So if you're looking at a 2-year, 3-year time frame, understand that in 12 to 18 months, as you move along that path, you could even have more choices, and some things might crystallize more than they are right now. So very interesting times, definitely a time of transition, and that's mobile credentials. Last poll.
Awesome.
Did we ask this?
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Yes. So let me see here. I'm going to launch it. How soon would you like to go mobile? All right, everyone. Let's see what everyone's thoughts are. Results are rolling in. Dave, you're going to love these. These are some interesting responses. Not what I was thinking, but what do I know? Okay, I'm going to close it down, and I'm going to share. Okay, 43% say next year you want to be a mobile. I guess 38 showing 2 to 3, and then 18% 3 to 5. So I guess it really, how soon would you like to go mobile? We're not really asking the question, 100% or just partial, or maybe just for admin. That is very interesting though.
All right. Yes, it certainly is interesting. And with that, brings us to the end of the presentation.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. So I've got some questions queued up, and just as a second that I make make that little reference to the last poll, some of you kind of revised saying, like, is it the reality that this would happen? We would like it to be, but of course, costs and admin, buy-in, all that stuff plays a big part into it. So that's definitely worth noting. Some folks are saying on the Q&A line, a lot of the drive is through student government organizations, and that's definitely what we've heard in the past too. The students, they are very savvy with their phones. They cannot live without their phones, and they will certainly lose their ID card before a phone. So that makes sense that they would be driving it. A couple of questions for you, Dave. Let's see here, how long would it take us to set up a 100 user pilot for our administrators to use?
Yeah, that could be very quick. Pretty much that's, send somebody an order for the credentials you want to buy. Make sure your readers are upgraded and properly flashed. Um, if you don't have a card format established, it might take a week or so to get that set up. So I would say within a matter of from the time you figure out what you want and place the order, probably within a couple weeks, you could be ready to go.
Well, here's an open-ended one. How much does a mobile ID cost?
Well, like I said, they do cost about what a card costs, but not a cheap card. And the rumors have floated around what the Transact schools pay. And I was at a NACU presentation and said, well, the other integrators seem to charge more. And the answer is yeah, that's what we've heard. I know they vary by quantity. The price varies by quantity. So if you buy more, you get a better price. But I think kind of that $4 to $6 range is what a license costs. Now, Duo, the comparison, runs about $6 a year per user. So there's kind of a digital price out there for comparison for this, but it is a different model.
And a good follow-up. What happens when a student's phone dies? The battery dies. What do you do?
Oh, that's interesting. I, not being an iPhone user, I had to go to the Apple website to find out how they work. So Apple has a very nice, because most of your phones are going to be Apple. Apple has a nice feature now in the later versions where there's a reserve on the battery. So even after the phone is effectively dead, it will still send credentials. So it's built for Apple Pay, and now that same feature will support NFC. So they wanted to make sure if you're at the grocery store and your phone dies, you still can make your payment with Apple Pay, and the same thing will get you through a door. So even after the phone is dead, it still will have a number of transactions for a number of hours left in it. For the Android phones, it's going to vary by handset to handset as to whether they have that feature.
Dave, I'm going to have to test that out whenever we get back to the office and we're through with this COVID-19 thing, because I'm going to make sure my phone is 100% dead, and I'm going to try to get in the office and see what happens, and I'll let you know.
There you go. Yeah, proof of concept.
Exactly. It worked. It definitely didn't work. So let me see here. Do we know if Apple would currently allow an incremental approach of rollout, i.e. just POS only? Is that possible? Do we know?
My understanding, and I'm not in the middle of this, and the companies that had NDAs, I don't know if they've expired yet now that this has been introduced. I'll bet there's still information that can't be discussed. But my understanding is that Apple still requires a very high percentage of readers are on campus, so that anywhere you would use a card, you have to be able to use a phone. So it requires a large upgrade of the readers to be able to read the Apple credentials.
Gotcha. Here is another good question. So we all know that Apple Wallet is still very limited for companies to access and use. Any idea when they will open up for open platform use?
Apple is the showman of the mobile industry, right? They do their rollouts and their shows. No, I have no idea. It seems like, again, their focus is Apple Pay and NFC. Somebody, somewhere along the line a few years ago, maybe because the integrators, maybe because Transact got in there and caught their ear, but they realized, oh, maybe this is kind of like the financial industry, like the banks want the university students to start using their bank because they hope they will be customers for life. Maybe Apple has kind of realized, oh, if we get the students using our handsets and they already are, But if we just lock that in, maybe this is a market worth doing that. So they have been pretty demanding because they're Apple. They're like one of the most highly valued companies in the world. But you know, maybe it's just a question: will they drop their standards a little bit so that everybody else can get in there at a lower level? We don't know.
Perfect. Let's see here. I think going through everything, that kind of sums up the majority of the questions. Awesome. Okay, some really good questions there. Thank you, everyone, for submitting those questions, being very quick on responding of the polls. Thanks for everybody for participating in the 5-part series. For those that attended all 5 of these webinars, you'll certainly be receiving a swag bag as well as a certificate of completion whenever we get out of this COVID-19 era right now. For those that missed a showing, then please know, just like Danny said at the beginning, we will have an additional webinar series launch off here later this week. We're going to start over at 1 and then go through all 5 of them again. So you do have an opportunity to catch them again if you missed the first time. So please take advantage of that. So that's it. With that said, on behalf of Danny, David, and myself, be safe. Thank you for attending, and we'll talk soon.